Hey guys, 99% of you watching are not currently subscribed, so if you could subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate that and enjoy the video. Okay, so I know it says Masters here right now, but it's a new split, new me. Last split, I got to GM for the first time, and at one point, I was even about 100 LP, about 5 games off of Challenger. And I wanted to, take a break and talk about what it is that helped me improve from Masters to GM. I did a video on what helped me improve from being kind of stuck in low diamond and plat before Emerald was the thing, and what helped me go from there to diamond. And to be honest, it's a lot of the same stuff. I really don't feel like I figured something crazy out when I went from Masters to GM. And I'm pretty confident that I will hit GM again. And I'm pretty hopeful that I'll get to Challenger for the first time soon when I have more time to play. But let's think about, what got me to GM and what can you guys apply in your games that I've learned along the way. And so, a couple of things. I've kind of pointed these things out before, but number one, you need to play in good condition. And what I mean by that is, League is a mental game. You have to be able to think at your best. And there's a lot of things that go into that. You have to not be hungry. You have to not be thirsty. You need to take care of your responsibilities first so that you're not worried and subconsciously stressed or thinking about other things when you're trying to play and make decisions. You got to have good hygiene and take a shower and brush your teeth and and all this stuff. And you want to have a good temperature. You don't want to be too hot and you're frying your brain and you can't think, or too cold and your hands are jittery and you can't click right. It's actually kind of crazy how much I've honed some of these things in. And these things are going to make your life better anyways, right? Obviously, big ones like don't play while you're tired, don't stay up too late, play at a good time of day. There are peak hours when most people are playing League, and it's much nicer to play during peak hours for a couple of reasons. One, you're less likely to get autofilled because there's a big pool of people that it's matchmaking from. And two, the MMR of the players that it finds for the game that it puts together, especially at higher elo, are much more likely to be at parity with each other or closer together. So imagine you only have 4,000 people at my rank or above me, even now that I'm at Masters. In GM, right, it was 1,000 people. And if you've only got that many people and most of them are offline, right, and you're matchmaking out of like a couple dozen people or something like that, you're going to have a very difficult time putting a game together where everyone's like exactly 20 mmr from within 20 mmr of each other. And so you get some whack lobbies, as you see often in high elo, where you have like master players playing in challenger lobbies or something like that, or diamond players getting stuck in a master or GM game. And it happens at all ranks, right? But it's less likely to happen if you're playing during peak hours. So understand that even though you're not maybe a student and getting off school at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, or you're not, someone who's working and getting off work at 5 p.m., that happens for a lot of people, and that's when a lot of people get on. And so you're much more likely to avoid those problems with matchmaking if you queue up at, let's say, 3 p.m. there's a spike because of people getting off of school. At 5 p.m., 6 p.m., the spike from people getting off of work. Maybe they get home and do some stuff, and then they eat dinner, and then they start playing or something. But generally, my experience is it would make sense that the most people are playing probably from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then you got to take into account time zones. So if you're Pacific time, your 6 p.m. is somebody else's 9 p.m. is Eastern time's 9 p.m. So 6 p.m. Pacific time is probably your peak, because that's when you have everyone home from work, coast to coast in NA. Pacific people are coming home, and the Eastern people maybe at 9 p.m. haven't gotten off yet, or like the rate at which people are getting off yet is pretty low. And so your peak hours is probably 6 p.m. Pacific time. And so a little bit before, a little bit after that, right, is going to be your ideal time to play. So I usually think, depending on how long you want to play each night, your best time to play is probably going to be like 3 p.m. Pacific time to like 7 p.m. Pacific time, something like that. I'm CST, whatever that is for your thing. So CST, you add 2 hours. So it's probably like, for CST, it's, what would that be? Like 5 p.m. to like 9 p.m. And that's about right. Never the worst time to play, right, is at like midnight to like 7, 8 in the morning. That is the worst time to play. There's basically 3 stages, and I joke a lot about this with other high elo players, but we've basically got 3 time zones on the NA solo queue ladder. You've got like the normies playing from like afternoon to midnight roughly. So that's like normie o'clock. And then you've got midnight to 7 a.m. These are peak degen hours, right? We also call this in NA China o'clock, right? China o'clock from midnight to 7 a.m. They're on a different time zone. Maybe they're up and they're playing cross server in NA at that time. Maybe it's just the Chinese college students here that are going crazy and for some reason are staying up all night at midnight to 7 a.m. And there's no regular people queuing at that time to save you from these teammates. No reasonable person is playing during these hours, and you're very likely to get auto-filled like every other game, especially at high elo. So never touch midnight to 7 in the morning. At 8 and 9 in the morning, a lot of the degenerates have started to fall asleep, and you get more normal people who are maybe waking up and playing before work or before school, college students, right, who have class, but it doesn't start until 9, 10, 11 p.m. And so they're kind of chilling and playing a couple of games in the morning, but still not a lot of people because most people are either still asleep or they're off at work or at school. And so keep that in mind. So the time you queue up is pretty important. Champion select management. What I mean by that is actually paying attention in champion select. I watch way too much YouTube when I'm in queue and when I'm in champion select, but it's really important, especially the higher you get, to min-max everything. And that means paying attention to who you're playing against, giving yourself time to pick. We all know the feeling where, we're alt-tabbing back in and we've got 3 seconds to pick a champion and analyze the whole enemy team comp and see what they've banned. And we're like scrambling to pick something and we pick some random champion like 1 second before. You should not ever be going into a ranked game and doing that. I'm sure people even know that you have games like that where you do that and you can't figure out what to pick and you just end up straight up dodging and finishing your video or something like that. It's so bad. So don't do that. At one point, I was straight up and what can I say? I'm good, but I would watch YouTube videos, not on a second monitor, on my main monitor, alt-tabbing back and forth while I was in solo queue in like Masters. Don't recommend doing that if you're trying to improve or climb or gain the respect of your teammates, etc. So to all the 80 carries out there that I tilted and ran down, you probably caught me on a game where I was watching a good YouTube video. I was alt-tabbing in and out. It is what it is, Another thing that really helped me, but is really unfortunate because there's not a lot you can do about it, is ping is extremely important. I'll probably make a whole nother video about ping in and of itself, but ping is extremely important. So I've played on a lot of different pings before because originally I was living on the West Coast back when the server was in California, and I was playing on about 20 ping. Then the server moved to Chicago, but I was still living on the West Coast, and I was playing on 60 ping. The difference between 20 ping and 60 ping is massive. abilities don't interact the same way. And so the way that you play trades and the way that you want to use your abilities and the timing that you would use to use your abilities is different on 8 ping versus on 20 ping versus on 60 ping, because it's not possible to use your abilities that way. So sometimes, like, you could do something with ult, but it's so hard to do that, like, it's not worth it to try to do it, because it's very difficult. Think about, for example, like one I ran into the other day is I'm playing Braum, and I saw somebody going for the blast cone, and so I tried to ult them while they were, like, going to be in midair with the blast cone, and it didn't work, right? This type of play is so difficult to do because the timing has to be very precise, that it's almost just not worth going for. And so you subconsciously write these plays off as like bad ideas because you've gone for them and they haven't worked. But all of a sudden, if you're a player who's on 100 ping or 60 ping and you come and you start doing those things on 10 ping, it's a different story. Now all of a sudden, all these cancellations and stuff that you couldn't do before are working really well. And so it changes the whole way that you're playing your champion and using your abilities. So ping is extremely important. I moved out to the Midwest and I was playing on, think like maybe 12 or 20 ping or something like that again. And then I was at one point playing on 4 ping on some fiber straight to Chicago where the server is. That was beautiful. And now I'm playing on like 12, 13 ping. I did get to GM when I was on 13 ping, and I just stayed in Masters the entire time I was on 4 ping, and I first hit Masters when I had moved from 60 ping to like 12 ping or 20 or whatever it was, back to that. So I really did feel like part of what got me to Masters after being hard stuck in like plat and low diamond, I had been bouncing back and forth between like D4 and like plat for like years straight and not really making any improvements. And I ended up demoting one time all the way down to plat 4. And I was like really trolling. I was like playing all kinds of random stuff in ranked. I was playing Lee Sin mid. I was watching YouTube while I was playing, stuff like that. And it got to the point where I was so sick of being bad at the game that I just had enough. And I just started playing seriously again. Started playing all the right champions that I knew how to play, stopped playing other roles and dodging if I got other roles, put everything together. And because of that, but also because the ping was really good, it made it really easy for me to climb. And so now that I was like seriously playing my main champion again, a decent number of games on low ping, I almost didn't have to improve anything because it just came naturally because of the ping. So obviously you're not going to be able to move, but if you are like an aspiring pro player or something, you actually just have to move. If you're an aspiring pro player, if you're Masters Plus, I'm old now, right? I got a kid on the way, but if you're an aspiring pro player, you need to straight up move to Chicago. Or if not Chicago, move to Milwaukee. You got fiber down to Chicago. That was where I was playing on 4 ping. So set yourself up in the Midwest. Tyler is not joking when he says the road to rank 1 runs through Missouri, because if you're in Missouri, which is also close to Chicago, this whole ring in the Midwest that's on 20 or lower ping has a huge advantage over the rest of the country. In solo queue. And what's really interesting is you used to see too in the professional players and the high elo players back in the day in season 2, season 3, season 4 were all coming out of California because the server was there, right? And now you see a lot more up and coming players, and trust me, I know a lot of them. I worked in amateur and stuff like that. They're all coming out of the Midwest now. And why is that? It's because of the ping. It's that simple. I even talk about like a big difference, I think, between Korea and NA one, there's a big difference in player base. So Korea's got about 4 times as many people. I've talked about before, but if you've got like a high school with 4 times as many people, their football team's going to be a lot better than the small private school that's got 1,000 kids or whatever, because they're drawing from a larger pool of people. And so their best football players are the best league players, in this case for Korea, because they're drawing from a large pool of people. Their top 10 league players are way better than our top 10 league players because they're drawing from a much larger pool of people. So the top of the top is much better. So it's that, and then it's also ping, because all Koreans, it's a very small country, and it's all very, very dense compared to America. And so almost everywhere in Korea, you're playing on 8 or less ping. And that's a huge advantage because they're all learning the game basically like on LAN level ping. And so that's why you see such good mechanics out of Korean players, is because from bronze to challenger, they're playing on such low ping that their mechanics have developed in an environment where it can be better. If you're an up and coming player, or even just your average players, right, in NA, our bronze players are going to be way worse because they're playing the game on like 60, 70 ping. And so how are they going to be able to play the game at all? They're literally learning the wrong thing. Like, they're learning what the abilities do and what the items do. They're learning some stuff about the game, like maybe where they should go and stuff like that, but they're not learning the mechanics of the game, because the mechanics of the game aren't the same at 100 ping and at 8. So that's actually a really huge deal, for sure. Let's see. This is another big one. This is the number one thing that helped me go from masters to, or from being hard stuck in like plat and diamond to getting to masters, and I've continued to implement it. From me going to masters to GM. Although, to be honest with you, I've stopped paying as much attention to it as I used to, and maybe that's a bad thing, and maybe I should start paying more attention to it again. Or maybe it's a good thing, because when you try to consciously learn something, eventually it should kind of fade into the background. Hopefully you automatically do it, but I don't know that I'm automatically doing it or not. The biggest one was ability usage, and thinking about whether using my ability was the most optimal thing to do there. And so when we think about League, oftentimes you're pressured into throwing abilities, or you're just throwing the ability because you're hoping to deal a little bit of damage or something. And that's not really how you should be using your abilities, right? You should be thinking about, what is the best possible way in this lane I can use my E on Braum? What is the best possible way that I can ult? In a team fight, what is the best possible way for me to use my E on Braum against this team? And so let's say I'm playing against a team and they have an Ornn and an MF, is a classic example I use, and they've got some other champions. I know that if I hold my E during the team fight, I can block Ornn ult. And if I hold my ult, when MF starts her ult, I can cancel it. And this does a couple of things for me. One, now I know that while it may have felt like I needed to E when I'm taking a couple of autos, or when my AD carry is going to get hit with a couple of autos in a fight, it's way more important for me to block the Ornn ult than it is for me to block those couple of auto attacks. Or a Karma will throw Q at you or something like that, and you think, oh, well, I threw E and my timing was good and I blocked the ability, so that was a good use of Brahmi. But it's not. Just because your ability hit, or just because you did damage with it, or just because you used the thing correctly or whatever, doesn't mean that it was good. Because what matters is actually using it the best possible way that you can. And if you're not patient and you don't wait for those moments to come up, you will not practice and get good at using them in those times, and you'll continue to throw mediocre abilities out, instead of waiting for the best moments to use your abilities. So in that fight, right, I'm trying to wait for that. This is the other thing it does for you. Team fights are hard because there's 50 different things to look at, but thinking about your abilities this way tells you where to look in a fight in a lot of cases, especially on support where you've got a lot of reactionary defensive abilities, from Janna to Braum, all kinds of stuff. So even an engaged champion, right, you're looking for them to use certain spells and stuff so that you can actually go in. So it tells you where to look, because now I know that during the fight, I need to watch Ornn and wait for his ult animation and the sound, and I need to watch MF and wait for her to ult. And so it's just that simple. You just stop throwing your abilities out every couple of seconds every time it comes up, just because you have the ability up. It's way better, to use Braum E to block the Ornn ult or whatever it is, than to throw up E and try to block a couple of auto attacks, or like throw up E and then throw yourself at the enemy and then they hit you with something. Even if it means that you're waiting so long to use E that you're not using it and you're just sitting on it for a couple of seconds. And that's what you notice if you watch high elo players play. They don't just spam all their abilities at the start of a fight. They're very slow and deliberate about using their abilities. So I'm telling you, like, go watch a silver player play and they're throwing all their abilities right at the start of the fight, right? Go watch a high elo player play on stream. They're very patient with their abilities. They're holding them forever until the exact right moment or ability to counter. League is like a fighting game when it comes to the way that you use abilities, right? There's going to be an optimal timing to counter somebody. And people don't think about it like that because they're so focused on everything else that's going on with the game, because it's obviously a lot more complex than just a one-on-one fighting game. You've got a lot of macro stuff to keep in mind. You've got other things to learn. But I think it really gets lost in the details as you tell somebody to play one champion and they actually fall into a pit, which is, while it is better to learn everything else about the game by playing that one champion, right? You get so comfortable playing that champion and throwing their abilities out and like knowing the range, so it's like easy for you to hit stuff or whatever. I got so comfortable throwing out Qs on Braum and throwing out E and stuff like that to block anything that was coming my way, and I thought I was playing it well because I'm like getting more abilities out. But it's not really about the quantity of abilities that you throw out there. It's about the quality of them. And there's a big difference between like a Q that leads to somebody, dying, or a Q that leads to like them failing a gank because you held Q and you had it the whole time. And then you threw it as they were walking in and they couldn't catch up to you guys. And, like just throwing a Q and hitting it, and dealing 100 damage or something like that to them in lane. It's a super big thing. My wife plays Janna, right? All the time. She really likes to throw these long range Qs on Janna, where she charges up for 3 seconds because it does more damage and it travels further and it's faster. And so Janna is a perfect example of a champion that has all these little traps about the way that you use the abilities. If you're too comfortable using the abilities, you're going to spam Q off of cooldown, these like long range Qs that almost never hit, and then their jungler comes and you don't have Q, or their support engages on you and you don't have Q, right? And it's always better to hold your Q in case that stuff happens. And so when you watch me play Janna compared to her, I almost never do a long range Q like that. I almost always hold it defensively to throw something, a short CC that's instant to shut down whatever play that they're doing. Same thing with her E. Janna's E gives AD, so she'll just throw it on people when they're hitting people. Well, what's more important, that they do like, an extra 60 damage or something like that in this trade, or that you use it at the proper time and block like 200 damage, right? It's obviously much better if you shield at the proper time to block the damage coming in, because the E, right, shields for much more than it gives in terms of damage, even if they're getting multiple autos in. You also got to consider, even if it gives like 60, 70 AD, half of that's getting cut in half by their resistances and stuff. So you get the idea, right? Same thing with Janna ult. There's a lot of times when you just want to instantly ult and push people away in order to disengage. And there are other times where you want to get a really long, healing ult off. And you can use it in those two different ways. But oftentimes I see um, like holding the ult too long because you want to get healing out of the ult, but it's compromising your positioning. So now we're just ulting forever, even as they're coming into melee range, right? Things like that. So ability usage is super important. For me, the two biggest things that caused me to improve from being like that hard stuck plat player or diamond player to getting to masters and then to GM, 100% was my ping going down and my ability usage. And my ability usage was enabled because of the ping. So I was able to get much better at my ability usage, partially because things that were harder to time before became easier to time. But what I will tell you, and I've said this before too, is that if you think that you, even if you're on higher ping, if you think that you can't do it and so you never try to do it, you'll never get good enough at doing it, right? And so you have to actually think about those scenarios and try to wait to block the Ornal. So let's say you're a Braum player and you're, in gold and you have a hard time consistently blocking the Ornal, or you're still learning, that you have to do it backwards instead of blocking the forwards one. You're going to have to try that, and you're going to have to try and fail at that a couple of times before you start doing it perfectly. But if you never try, you'll never get it right. And so you have to be in that mindset and that mentality, looking for those things that you should be working on, practicing on in that game, those key ability interactions that you should be playing off of. That's it. The other thing is knowing what the key ability interactions even are, right? Like there is a little bit of knowledge that goes into knowing that, hey, if I ult a Fiddlesticks while he's channeling his ult, it'll cancel his ult. Or if I ult the MF when she's ulting, it'll cancel her ult. Or that when I go to block Ornn, right, I've got to E backwards on Braum to block his initial horn that he's calling to himself and take that away, rather than using it to just block the Ornn that he's I don't even know what it is, the thing that he's hitting back at you, the ram that he's hitting back at you, rather than blocking that, because that'll still knock you up even if you use E on it, and it can also like still hit other people, rather than just slowing them. So things like that, right? There's a lot of game knowledge that goes into that. Same thing with like Anivia, for example. Braum E can block Anivia Q stun, or is it? Yeah. There's certain situations in which Braum Q blocks Bard Q, and certain situations in which it doesn't. And you gotta know that, otherwise it's not gonna work right. So you've gotta. This is a big thing, is that in Silver they tell you gotta learn all the abilities in the game and what they do, but what they don't tell you is when you get to Plat or Diamond, you need to learn, especially at least for your champion that you main, or a couple of champions that you main, you need to learn all of the special ability interactions, like weird things that you can do to counter other abilities like you would in a fighting game. You need to learn what those things are. And there's a lot more of them, because if there's 700 abilities in the game or something like that, there's 700 abilities that could interact with 700 other abilities. And so they're multiplied when you're looking at all of the different ability interactions, and so there's hundreds of thousands of them. Now, luckily, most of them, like a Caitlyn throwing Q at a Sivir and the Sivir throwing Q at the Caitlyn, most of them are going to be pretty mundane. But some of them, like we just went through, are going to be more nuanced and complex, and those ability interactions, especially for your champion, you need to know them and learn them and memorize them. And if you can't say what happens when, you Braum E towards the Karthus who's ulting, or what happens when you Braum E and Lux ults you, then you don't know. I'll just say it, right? Like in this case, if Karthus ults, you can't block it because it's not a projectile for your teammates, but Braum E blocks the first instance of damage that's being dealt to him. And so as long as you're facing the right direction with Karthus, your E will block the damage. And depending on where you are on the map, there's kind of a generic angle where like if you're on the bottom right side of the map, you're going to angle towards the rest of the map, right? Because even if you don't know where he is, he's probably that way. And if you're in like the bottom left of the map, you're going to angle to the, up to the top right of the map, so that you're kind of naturally blocking most any angle he could be from, even if you don't know where he is. And so I do that all the time. Same thing with Lux laser, right? Like it's a laser, it's not a projectile. So you can't block it for your teammates, just like you can't block Karth Assault with your teammates, for your teammates. But same thing, you can block it, the damage that it would deal to yourself, using Brahmi. The other thing, right? Like true damage will go through the first instance of Brahmi that's supposed to protect him from like any damage except true damage. So if a pike ults you and you E, your E will not do anything. If a set W's you, right, that's true damage. It will not do anything. If a Garen ults you and you try to E, not going to do anything. So you have to know all of these kind of interesting or maybe different than expected interactions, because if you're playing normally and you don't understand all this stuff, you're just going to Brahmi the set W and wonder why you died. And so you got to know this stuff. It's as important as knowing what set W is. If you know what set W is, but you don't know whether you can block it or not with your champion, then I mean, come on, you don't really know how it works, right? In the same way that like a silver player doesn't know what set W is, Camera control was another big one. I'd actually put this one as number 3. I was playing on lock screen back when I was in Plat and Diamond, and you don't get as much information that way. And the reality is that you can keep your camera kind of locked, a lot of times that you're in lane and stuff like that, or in team fights, but you need to be moving your camera around and being aware of what's going on in the game. And at the end of the day, unlocking my camera helped me tremendously, because I already knew, I had played the game so much as someone who was stuck in that rank for years. I had played the game enough that I had the experience of what would happen in certain situations if people are in certain spots, that if I just had the information, if I just saw what was going on around me, I'd make the correct decision most of the time. But I wasn't collecting enough information with my camera, so it was impossible for me to make the right plays, because I just was operating on less information than other people. And so my decision making was pretty good, but I was limiting my decision making by not feeding myself enough information with my camera. And so unlocking my camera was annoying for like a month, but at the end of the day, if you've been hard stuck for a year, or if you've gone up a couple of divisions or a division in a year, is a month really going to change a whole lot for you? Is demoting a division and then getting way better at the game and going up a whole rank or something like that really not something you're willing to do? So camera control is super important, actually seeing what's going on. And that's pretty much it. Those would be the main ones for sure. Is like my ping improving, which I know that kind of sucks. There's not a whole lot that you can do about that, because mostly ping is just going to be based off of how far you are from Chicago at the end of the day. I mean, if you have access to fiber, obviously getting fiber could reduce your ping. So if you are in a city and you have access to fiber and you want to get that, or you can get that, that's pretty important. Ability usage and training yourself to be patient with your abilities and use them at the right time, and practicing those interactions and learning what those ability interactions are so that you're actually comfortable doing them automatically. And then the third one is just unlock your camera finally, if you haven't already. And even if you're unlocking your camera, there's a lot of people who sort of unlock their camera, right? But they're like locked most of the time, or they unlock their camera, but they're not moving it around enough and seeing what's happening around them well enough. So all those things, can be taken into account. And then of course, like I said in the beginning too, play at a good time of day. When there aren't degenerates playing the game and ruining it, and play when you're able to think clearly, when you're able to play well, rather than just, playing when you're absolutely brain dead. So hope you guys learn something, and good luck in solo queue, and have a beautiful day.